I am May Alpedes, a fourth-year student taking up Bachelor of Arts in Psychology. The scientific study of human behavior and mental processes is known as psychology. Essentially, psychology helps people in large part because it can explain why people behave in certain ways, as well as improve communication skills, build relationships, and gain a better understanding of how others feel and think. The topic that I'll be discussing in this subject is about reliability and validity given by Ma'am Nerissa Beatriz. So, testing and assessment is really important for some reason. It is a way na ginagamit para makatulong sa decision making ng mga bagay-bagay. So, like for example na lang, sa school. So, we use this testing and assessment para monitor or to make judgment ng student proficiency. So, importante din to sa pagpili kung sinong student ang kailangan na makagrant ng scholarship. Or another thing is sa workplace. So, it is used as a basis kung sino nga bang employee ang kailangan na i-hire or i-promote or kaya naman ay i-fire. And also, it is really important sa pag-diagnose ng mga mental health problems. So, sa tulong nito, itong testing and assessment, ito ang magde-decide sa qualifications ng mga tao. Kaya naman, di ba, may tinatawag tayong licensure exam or itong board exam. So, from those given explanation, importance, it is really needed na the test we used is good. So, dapat good ang test na meron tayo. Kasi may mga technical criteria that the assessment professional are used para ma-evaluate ang quality ng test and other measurement procedures. We can say na good ang isang test when it contain a psychometric properties like reliability and validity. So what is included in this discussion? So here, madidiscuss natin ang reliability and validity definition, its importance, and types. Let us first discuss what is reliability. Reliability is a synonym for dependability or consistency. Broadly speaking, in the language of psychometrics, reliability refers to consistency in measurement. So, bago natin i-define ang reliability sa context ng testing and assessment, i-apply muna natin siya sa real life para mas lalong maintindihan. So, in life, maaari nating maihalin tulad ang reliability sa mga taong malapit sa atin. Like, for example, sa family, or friends, or kung may significant others man, and kung sino pa mga taong madedefine natin as reliable person. So, diba, marami tayong mga qualities or characteristic na madedefine sa mga taong yon. Pero isa sa mga qualities na hindi mawawala ay ang word na dependable and consistent, which is synonymous siya sa word na reliability, diba? So, dependable siya and consistent in a sense na whenever na naharap tayo sa malaking problema or struggle sa buhay, lagi silang naandyan to help us and guide us consistently. So, ganun rin sa context ng testing and assessment. So, masasabi nating reliable lang isang test kung consistently nitong name-measure ang mga variables. Masasabi nating reliable ito kung it gives a consistent result kahit na paulit-ulit pang i-take ang isang test. So, to know the degree of consistency ng test or measurement, we use reliability coefficient. Reliability coefficient is an index of reliability, a proportion that indicates the ratio between the true score variance on a test and the total variance. The concept of reliability. A statistic useful in describing sources of test score variability is the variance. Variance has two components, true variance and error variance. The true variance is the variance from true differences, and error variance is the variance from irrelevant and random sources. True variance is naturally occurring variable siya sa mga participants. So, meaning, pag sinabi natin naturally occurring, stable siya. Like, for example na lang nito is personality trait. Whereas yung error variance naman ay maraming mga irrelevant sources na nakaka-apekto sa pagme-measure. Ito ay dahil sa presence ng mga extraneous variables. So, yun na nga, madaming mga irrelevant sources or madaming mga factors na nakaka-apekto tulad ng environmental factors. Kung mainit or masyadong malamig sa lugar kung saan ginaganap ang test. Or maaari naman ng dahil sa maingay ang place. So, another thing din is pwedeng maging factor ay ang state ng nagtetest or ang kanyang emotional state. Maaring may mga physical discomfort kasi na nararamdaman before or during niyang i-take ang isang test. Yung mga scenario like masakit ang ulo or masakit ang ngipin or humihilab ang tiyan or kaya naman sobrang excited or kaya naman maaring kabado ang isang test taker. So, another factor pa is pwede din na maging source ng error ang examiner kung yung personality niya ay hindi kaaya-aya or kaya naman ay masungit or masyadong stricto or hindi approachable. So, another source pa ay ang test construction. So, may mga instances kasi na hindi naiintindihan ng examinee ang instruction o kaya naman ay mali ang pagkakakonstruct niya dito. And also, pwede rin na magkaroon ng error sa scoring. For example na lang sa pag-count ng mga tama or maling sagot. So, the term reliability refers to the proportion of the total variance attributed to true variance. So, dito, kung mas greater ang proportion ng total variance attributed to true variance, the more naman na reliable ang isang test. So, here, na-differentiate natin ang difference ng true variance and error variance, which is nga sa true variance, ito yung variance from true differences. At ito namang error variance ay madaming tayong mga nabanggit na mga sources of error na pwedeng maka-apekto sa resulta o sa pag-measure ng test. So, ito yung mga sources of error na yun. Yung test construction, yung administration, scoring, and interpretation. Madaming mga methods o mga reliability estimates na ginagamit to measure the reliability ng isang test. And these are test-retest reliability estimates, parallel forms and alternate forms reliability estimates, split-half reliability estimates, and internal consistency or inter-item consistency. First is test-retest reliability estimates. Test-retest reliability is an estimate of reliability obtained by correlating two pairs of scores from the same people on two different administrations of the same test. So, basically, involve ang time. May time interval. Kasi, based from the definitions, ang ginagawa sa method na ito ipapatest sa parehong sample ng test taker with the same instrument para measure yung same factor or characteristic in a different period or in a different point in time. So, yun na nga, may time interval ng days or weeks or months sa unang test and sa retest. So, tinitest sa reliability estimates na ito ang coefficient of stability. The test-retest measure is appropriate when evaluating the reliability of a test that purports to measure something that is relatively stable over time, such as personality trait. So, usually, ginagamit ang reliability estimates na ito sa pag-evaluate o pag-measure ng mga stable na variable. Like, for example, personality traits. So, sabi ko nga kanina, ang personality trait ay relatively enduring or stable kasi nature na siya ng tao. Naturally na nag-o-occur na siya, unlike sa states or emotional states na pabago-bago ang emosyon because of so many factors. So, the importance of test-retest reliability estimates is from that given explanation. So, ang importance nito is kung ang result is correlated and it doesn't change over time, we can say na it is reliable. Next, reliability estimates is parallel forms and alternate forms reliability estimates. So, it is usually na-experience natin. Like for example, pag nagtitake tayo ng makeup exam in which yung mga questions were not all the same sa initial test na na-take natin or naibigay sa atin. Although, same rin naman sila when it comes to context or concept. Doon nag-wonder tayo if the test nga ba were really equivalent. So, dito sa reliability estimates na to, ang mini-measure ay ang coefficient of equivalence. So, the term parallel forms reliability refers to an estimate of the extent to which item sampling and other errors have affected test scores on versions of the same test when for each form of the test, the means and the variances of observed test scores are equal. The term alternate forms reliability refers to an estimate of the extent to which these different forms of the same test have been affected by item sampling error or other error. So, di ba dito, sa reliability estimates na to, mini-measure ang coefficient of equivalence. And if yung dalawang version ng test is correlated with each other, then mataas ang chances na reliable ito. So, dito may advantage and disadvantage rin. So, isang disadvantage niya ay sa pag-develop or pag-create ng two forms or versions ng test is time-consuming and expensive. Sa pag-create kasi nito, masyadong matrabaho kasi dalawa ang ginagawang forms. And also, sa pagkuha din ng the same people or sample for repeated administration ng test. So, may advantage din siya. Kasi dito, maaring maiwasan ang memorization ng sagot unlike sa unang reliability, sa test-retest reliability, na there is an instances na maaari niyang ma-memorize yung mga tanong. So, kung ganun, may idea na siya sa mga isasagot niya sa pag-take ng retest. Next is split half reliability estimates. An estimate of split half reliability is obtained by correlating two pairs of scores obtained from equivalent halves of a single test administered once. It is a useful measure of reliability when it is impractical or undesirable to assess reliability with two tests or to administer a test twice. The computation of a coefficient of split half reliability generally entails the three steps. Step 1 is to divide the test into equivalent halves. One acceptable way Para ma-split ang test is to randomly assign items to one or the other half of the test. Another method is the use of odd-even reliability. So, in this method, magbe-based sa assigned numbers sa paghati. So, unang item is mga odd numbered items, and then the other half is even numbered items. And then, i-correlate na yung score nila sa isa't isa. Another way to split a test is to divide the test by content, so that each half contains items equivalent with respect to content and difficulty. So, the goal or the reason why splitting a test in half is important para maka-create ng what might be called mini parallel forms na each half is equal to the other half. Next is the step 2. Here, we calculate a Pearson R between two scores on the two halves of the test. Next, step 3, adjust the half-test reliability using the Spearman-Brown formula. So, main advantage nito, using these reliability estimates, kung dun sa parallel and alternate forms reliability estimates is expensive, dito naman is cheaper siya kasi single test lang naman siya. Pero one main disadvantage nito is dahil ang test using split half reliability is nahati sa dalawa, isang bagay na maaring maapektuhan ay ang internal consistency ng test. May chance kasi na baka maapektuhan ang pagme-measure ng test sa variable na mini-measure. Next is internal consistency. In addition to Spearman-Brown formula, other methods used to obtain estimates of internal consistency reliability include formulas like the Kuder-Richardson formulas, coefficient alpha, average proportional distance or APD. Inter-item consistency refers to the degree of correlation among all the items on a scale. A measure of inter-item consistency is calculated from a single administration of a single form of test. An index of inter-item consistency, in turn, is useful in assessing the homogeneity of the test. Tests are said to be homogeneous if they contain items that measure a single trait. In other words, homogeneity is the extent to which items in a scale are unifactorial. In contrast to test homogeneity, heterogeneity describes the degree to which a test measures different factors. A heterogeneous test is composed of items that measures more than one trait. So, the more na homogeneous ang test, the more that inter-item consistency can be expected to have. Because a homogeneous test samples a relatively narrow content area, it is to be expected to contain more inter-item consistency than a heterogeneous test. Test homogeneity is desirable because it allows relatively straightforward test score interpretation. Test taker with the same score on a homogeneous test probably have similar abilities in the area tested. Test takers with the same score on a more heterogeneous test may have quite different abilities. Although a homogeneous test is desirable because it is so readily lends itself to clear interpretation, it is often an insufficient tool for measuring multifaceted psychological variables such as intelligence, or personality. One way to circumvent this potential source of difficulty has been to administer a series of homogeneous tests, each designed to measure some component of heterogeneous variable. If reliability is all about the consistency in measurement, validity naman is all about the accuracy in measuring what they are intended to measure. Isang component din siya ng psychometric soundness kasama ang reliability. The concept of validity. In life, we can say that something is valid if it is empirically based or well-grounded ng mga principles or may mga evidences na sumusuporta. Like for example, based from mga theory or argument or mga reason na napatunayan na. Validity as applied to a test is a judgment or estimate of how well a test measures what it intended to measure in a particular context. So, masasabing valid ang isang test if madaming sumusuporta na evidence sa pag-measure ng construct na gustong sukatin. Siyempre, it is important na the result are based from evidences to say na it is valid or legit. An inference is a logical result or deduction. Characterizations of the validity of test and test scores are frequently phrased in terms such as acceptable or weak. These terms reflect a judgment about how adequately the test measures what it intended to measure. Validation is the process of gathering and evaluating evidence about validity. It may sometimes be appropriate for test users to conduct their own validation studies with their own groups of test takers. Local validation studies are absolutely necessary when the test user plans to alter in some way the format, instructions, language, or content of the test. There are types of validity ang minimeasure kapag gumagawa ng validation studies. Ang usually na ginagamit are the following: phase validity, content validity, criterion-related validity, and construct validity. First ay ang phase validity. Phase validity relates more to what a test appears to measure to the person being tested than to what the test actually measures. Phase validity is a judgment concerning how relevant the test items appear to be. Stated another way, if a test definitely appears to measure what it purports to measure on the face of it, then it could be said to be high in phase validity. So, in phase validity, if the test is sa unang tingin pa lang nag-a-appear na ang mga bagay na intended na ma-measure, then it could be said na high ang phase validity. Like for example na lang sa mathematical test, we can say na strong ang phase validity niya if sa unang tingin pa lang ni test taker ay may mga mathematical problems na siya na makikita. Like for example, mag-a-add or magsa-subtract si test taker. So, ang phase validity is important to keep the test taker motivated to do his part. Kasi sa unang tingin pa lang, alam niyang related ito sa bagay na mini-measure. Kasi if na-perceive niya na hindi naman to relevant and useful, then negative consequences may result. Next is content validity. So, if si phase validity is about the appearance ng test, si content validity naman answer the questions. Na-measure nga ba ng items or ng content ng test ang behavior that intended to measure, or how well the test fully represent what it aims or intended to measure. So, content validity describes a judgment of how adequately a test sample's behavior representative of the universe of behavior that a test was designed to sample. So, content validation methods seek to assess the quality of test items. If kung itong items nga ba on a test is representative of the entire domain that a test seeks to measure. For example na lang, the test is about assertiveness. So, dapat, the content is representative ng range ng assertiveness. So, dito, si test developer must have a clear vision ng construct being measured. And yung clarity ng vision na yun, dapat nagre-reflect sa content validity ng test. Next is criterion-related validity. Criterion-related validity is a judgment of how adequately a test score can be used to infer an individual's most probable standing on some measure of interest. The measure of interest being the criterion. So, criterion-related validity, mini-measure niya how well one measure predicts an outcome for another measure with the use of criterion or criteria. Criterion is the standard against which a test or a test score is evaluated. So, criterion, standardized na siya kung saan ibabase ang evaluation ng test. Criterion-related validity has two types: concurrent validity and predictive validity. Concurrent validity is an index of the degree to which a test score is related to some criterion measure obtained at the same time or concurrently. So, concurrent validity, mini-measure nito how well a new test compares to an well-established test. It refers to the practice of concurrently testing two groups at the same time or asking two different groups of people to take the same test. Like for example, in creating a new test for depression levels. So, ikukumpara ang performance sa previously na-establish na test na about sa depression level na high ang validity. Concurrent meaning at the same time. So, the two methods were compared about the same time. Next is predictive validity. Predictive validity is an index of the degree to which a test score predicts some criterion measure. So, if the test accurately predicts what it is supposed to predict or how well a certain measure can predict future behavior. So, one common uses or well-known uses for predictive validity is in college admissions. Kapag ang college admissions test napipredict ang grade point average ng isang student, meaning mataas ang predictive validity ng college admission test. So, another measures that can be used to validate test is construct validity. Construct validity is a judgment about the appropriateness of inferences drawn from test scores regarding individual standings on a variable called a construct. A construct is an informed, scientific idea developed or hypothesized to describe or explain behavior. Constructs are unobservable, presupposed traits that a test developer may invoke to describe test behavior or criterion performance. So, basically, construct validity answer the questions, does the test nga ba measure the concept that it is intended to measure? So, sabi, a construct is a concept or characteristic that cannot be directly observed or unobservable siya, pero can be measured by observing other indicators that are associated with it. For example na lang, intelligence is a construct that may be invoked to describe why a student performs well in school. Anxiety is a construct that may be invoked to describe why a psychiatric patient paces the floor. So, construct validity is ini-ensure niya na the method of measurement matches the construct intended to measure. If you develop a questionnaire to diagnose depression, you need to know na does the questionnaire nga ba really measure the construct of depression or mini-measure niya nga ba talaga nito ang respondent's mood, self-esteem, or some other construct. So, it is needed na the questionnaire must include only relevant questions about the depression or the construct being measured. So, in the first part of our discussion, we define reliability that refers to the consistency in measurement. Reliability coefficient is being used to know the degree of consistency of measurement. We also discussed variance, which has two components, the true variance and error variance. The true variance is true differences or stable variability sa mga participants. Like for example, is personality trait. Error variance is madaming mga variable na nakaka-apekto sa pagme-measure. Sa test construction, administration ng test, scoring, and interpretation. We also discussed the various reliability estimates or mga methods na ginagamit to measure the reliability ng isang test. These are test reliability, na it is about the consistency of measure across time. Alternate forms, parallel forms reliability, which indicates how consistent test scores are likely to be if a test taker takes two forms or version of test. Split half reliability estimates, which measure the extent to which all parts of the test contribute equally to what is being measured. And lastly is internal consistency, which indicates the consistency of measurement itself, or the extent to which items on a test measure the same thing. So in the second part of our discussion, we also discussed about the validity, which refers to the accuracy or how well a test measure what is intended to measure. We also discussed the types of validity. So first is yung face validity. Face validity consider how suitable the content of a test seems to be on the surface. Content validity assesses whether a test is representative of all aspects of the construct. Criterion-related validity evaluates how well a test can predict or concrete outcome, or how well the results of the test approximate the result of another test. And lastly, construct validity, which evaluates whether a measurement tool really represents the thing we are interested in measuring. In conclusion, reliability and validity is important sa mga psychological test. In test, it is important na mataas ang reliability and validity para masabi natin na psychometrically sound ang isang test. Kasi 'di ba, as I mentioned earlier, if the test contains reliability and validity, then we can say na good ang isang test.